Okay, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our clinician access training called Clinical Access to Research, Myths and Money. I'm Laura Gata and I'm here with Meredith Harold, and we're from CSDisseminate, which is a group of clinicians and scientists who are working to bridge that gap between scientific research and clinical practice. And we are joined by Helen Long, another member of CSDisseminate, who will be helping with the event. Next slide, please. So here's our team. Meredith is a founder, and then Helen and I are two of the collaborators within CSDisseminate, and there may be a few more on this call joining us tonight. All of our team members are volunteers, and we all volunteer to help advance the mission of our organization. At the end of today's presentation, we'll have some information about joining our team and getting involved with CSDisseminate. Next slide. Okay, so before we start, here are some disclosures for CSDisseminate, me, and Dr. Harold. And the next slide. Okay, so let's get started. As we said in the introduction, CSDisseminate is a group that was started by volunteer scientists and clinicians around the idea that we really need greater access to research, particularly for clinicians within our field of communication sciences and disorders. And thank you. We want to be able to provide the resources for both groups, scientists and clinicians. And one of the ways we're doing that is through our workshop today. Next slide. Okay, so today we'll discuss, start off with some common myths and barriers to accessing research, and then we'll share some free ways that you can access journal articles. So next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so if we take it back to the big picture, accessibility is a major issue, not just in our field, but also across science in general. If we're not able to access the most recent, latest, and greatest research, how can we then implement those recommendations and those strategies in the clinic? And studies have shown that it takes an average of about 17 years for evidence to get from the research that's being done through to clinical practice. And so through CSDisseminate, we are trying to show you and help move along that trajectory by introducing ways that we can try to access research so that you all can practice at the top of the evidence base.
All right, I'm excited to talk with you all about this. And thank you, Laura, and you all for your patience as I'm trying to drive the slides while Laura speaks. We made it work. All right. So first of all, we need to get some vocabulary in place. So note that there's a difference between publishers, journals, and articles. So there's dozens of publishers in our field, and they're all over the place, and they basically operate like businesses. Like some examples are Wiley, Springer, Taylor Francis, Sage, Elsevier. And then each of those publishers has hundreds of journals that exist within them. So if we were to ask how many journals there are, and back in the day, these were actually published as basically what looked like books or really thick magazines. Some of us used to go to the libraries and read them in that form or would get them at our house. There's hundreds of journals that publish SLP research. And I'll make a quick disclaimer as I'm saying SLP all over the place, but this lecture is for communication sciences and disorders in general. Every so often I'll pull data that's from one field or the other, and this data is specifically from SLP. And then within journals, each journal also has a ton of different articles. So for example, in our field, there's over 4,200 articles published every single year in speech language pathology. So if you were to take all of our field, I didn't grab the data for audiology, but we can pretty much assume it would be about double that. So what SLPs are usually looking for is access to single articles and access to often lots of single articles. Another term that's important to understand is what a DOI is. And it took me years of understanding research before I actually fully understood what the DOI is, but it's relevant for finding research. So basically a DOI is a digital object identifier, and it looks like a link. So on these slides, you'll see in those red boxes, those are DOIs. And the DOIs are important because they're permanent. And also you can put in the DOI and search in various places to get your hands on a single journal article. Whereas the actual URL that's at the top of the web page, those can break. So when you're either looking for research or trying to share research, like if you're giving a presentation to colleagues, or if you're trying to share a hyperlink for yourself that, you know, will never break, it's important that you always grab the DOI and not the URL that's up top in your browser. For example, ASHA journals made some major changes to their website several years ago. And for a long time, a lot of the URLs for ASHA journal articles were completely broken. But if people had saved the DOIs, they'd be able to get right back to them. So you're always looking for the DOI. All right. Another thing to know before we get into how to get access to all journal articles is that for US-based SLPs and audiologists who belong to ASHA, or anyone who belongs to ASHA, because international members can as well, a lot of times clinicians will think that they can't get access to ASHA's journal articles and that they have to pay for them because you have to sign in every time. It's just the way ASHA's website works. And so in this image on the left, you'll see that it looks like you have no access to that PDF, but in the upper right corner, you just need to click sign in. So on this right image, it shows Danica, for example, signed in, and then she'll be able to have access to that journal article. Another way is to just click on the PDF on ASHA Journal's sites and then click member login, and you'll get yourself logged in. So all ASHA journals are free all the time to ASHA members. Just make sure you're logged in. However, as we mentioned, ASHA journals aren't the only journals in our field. They're just 4 of over 350 journals that publish SLP research, and far more than that that also publish audiology research. So now let's sort of talk through how to get your hands on those other papers. My personal favorite option is to download Unpaywall. And so Helen is going to put Unpaywall in the chat so you all can grab it and open up that link. But basically, Unpaywall is a legal repository of millions of journal articles. And when you have it installed in the browser, in the browser that you use most often, basically it'll just pop up this little green unlocked button over to the side. So it'll look like that on your screen. And when you click that green unlocked button, it opens up the PDF in that tab for you. So rather than having to Google or search or know the right websites to check, or, you know, any other option that we're about to show you in a moment, if Unpaywall has a free legal PDF, it'll just take you right to it. And all you do is click the button. So anyone who's accessing journal articles really ever should, in my opinion, always have Unpaywall because it's the fastest option. And it'll look like this. So here's an example on the lower right-hand corner of what it looks like when you have access to something. Here's also an example of what it looks like up top when you don't have access. So when there is no free legal access, it'll just be gray and you won't be able to click it. Unpaywall also works by simply typing in the letters OA for open access into your browser at top, and then the DOI. So this is why it's important for us to know what those DOIs are, because you can also grab the DOI, type in OA, insert the DOI, and it'll pop open open access versions for you as well. So that trick basically pulls into Unpaywall's database of free legal journal articles. Step 2. So if that little gray button is, or if that little button is gray instead of green, the next thing that is going to be most likely to get you to a free PDF as quickly as possible is to go over to Google Scholar and put the article title that you're looking for into the search bar of Google Scholar. You might see PDFs over at the right that you can click, or you can click down below where it says all 7 versions to open up all the different versions of where this journal article might live, and you can get access to it. You can also, if you're looking for a specific researcher, you can use Google Scholar to find their professional website. So Dr. Helen Long, for example, I inserted her name into the search bar of Google Scholar, and then it pops her up. Luckily, there wasn't another Helen Long, but every so often you'll see a few different scientists that have the same name, and you'll have to just open them all to see which one is the one that's in our field in order to problem solve that. But when there's just one, you click on their name, and then it'll open up a page that looks like this. So this is Helen's publications, all down here below. If you click on those publication links down below, it's going to take you right back to what Google Scholar had already shown you. So that's not going to be particularly useful. But what might be useful is see how up here at the top, next to Helen's picture, it has a link to her professional website and says homepage. That will take you to Helen's website, and a lot of scientists will have free PDFs of their research hosted on their own website. And if not, you can also contact them from that location, which we'll discuss in a few slides as well. So not all scientists maintain a professional website, but we do recommend for any scientists who are on this call that they all do, and you'll figure out why by the end, because it's one of the only ways to help really guarantee broad access of our field science. All right, so if Unpaywall didn't work, and if Google Scholar didn't work, you've got a few other things that you can still do. One thing is you can put the journal article title directly into Google. So not Google Scholar, but just plain old Google. And you're going to look through the top 5 hits. Some of the things that you're looking for is, yes, it'll take you back to the publisher's website. And if you have Unpaywall installed, you'll be able to see there, but you probably should have already tried that. But you could start with the Google option and get to the publisher's website that way. You could also find ResearchGate PDFs that way. The thing with ResearchGate, some of you who are here tonight will already have ResearchGate accounts. I would recommend that most people go ahead and set up a ResearchGate account if you don't. However, over time, ResearchGate has gotten harder and harder to set up accounts. And I've found that a lot of clinicians can't get ResearchGate accounts because ResearchGate has over time put various checks in place where they, for example, expect you to have a .edu email address in order to get immediate free access to it. So if you can't get in, it wouldn't shock me. But I also know a lot of clinicians who have been able to find their way into ResearchGate. And for example, I have a ResearchGate account, but I haven't worked as a clinician in years. And it's because I set it up a very long time ago. And so it still just works for me. But you might be able to get ResearchGate PDFs through Google. Another option is that you will see the scientist lab website pop up in Google when you Google the title as well. In general, I found that if I can't find a free PDF somehow within the top 5 or so hits, there's a decent chance that it doesn't exist. So starting straight with Google is an option as well. All right. So say you've tried all those things. You've Googled, you'd look in Google Scholar, you have Unpaywall installed, you've looked through ResearchGate, or maybe you don't have access to ResearchGate. You've looked for the scientist website and you're just not finding anything. That whole process really shouldn't take you more than about 2 minutes total. And if, especially if you're used to doing it, maybe if it's your first time doing it, it might take you 15 minutes because you're trying to figure out what websites to navigate to. But once you've done it a lot, it's actually a really fast process to do that search. And if you still can't find a free PDF, the next thing you're going to do is email the author to ask for it. So as we discussed earlier in the myths, and it surprised Laura, which I love because it always surprises scientists that people in general don't realize that scientists can just give you their research for free. And all you have to do is email them to ask for it. They don't make any money off these publications anyway. And it's 100% of the time perfectly legal for them to share a version of their research with you. And so all you have to do is send them a quick email that says, "Hi, Dr. So-and-so, I'd like to read your article." Paste the article in the body of the email. Could you share a PDF with me? Thanks, the end. It doesn't have to be long. You don't have to say why you're asking. Scientists are used to receiving these emails all the time. And in fact, the more they receive these emails, the more it shows that people are consuming their research. So they're happy to receive these emails and they're happy to share PDFs. So quick email, send it to the scientist. So the way you'll find who to email though, is you want to try to find the corresponding author. So you'll notice in these images that there's actually several authors of these publications, but there's always one who's designated the corresponding author. That just means, among other things, that this person is basically in charge of and has agreed among all of them to basically field emails related to that publication. So they're ready to receive emails. That's why on journal websites, they always have the scientist's email address. So like for Danica here, you would click on that little email icon and it would pop it up. You're almost always able to find author emails directly on the journal article page. And we'll post these PowerPoint slides as well as the recording to our website when we're done with this tonight. And a lot of these things are hyperlinked. I'm not going to click on every single hyperlink because it will slow us down. But the reason I created this slide was to explain to you that these are all different publishers. ASHA Wire is a publisher, Wiley's a publisher, Science Direct is a publisher. It's Elsevier is what that takes you to. Taylor and Francis is a publisher. And every single publisher sort of has a format for where they keep the email address, and where it is on the page is going to vary a little bit, but I promise you it's almost always there. There's only one publisher that doesn't do it, and there's not very many of our Fields articles that are published in that publisher's stuff. So you can find it. You can also just, whoop. Oh, I'm clicking links anyway. There we go. You can also Google to find the scientist's name if somehow you can't get it. And you should be able to hunt it down some way, especially with adding their university as well. Or alternatively, if you ever have the front page of a journal article or can see the front page of a journal article, or say maybe you already have a PDF and you want to communicate with the author, just so that you know, it's almost always on the bottom of the front page of journal articles as well. So this corresponding author information is published on the first page of that PDF right down here. And this is what it looks like. So it'll show the author's name, where they work, usually a university, sometimes a business or an institute or something like that, and it'll have their email address in there. Okay, so let's say you sent an email to the author and you're waiting, and maybe it went to their spam. So you're, kind of stuck. What are some of the other options? Sometimes if you can, just waiting a little while actually makes a really big difference. So in my work and through my business, we're trying to get journal articles constantly. And we see this happen a lot, where in 1 month, something won't be open access. There won't be any PDFs for free online. We can't find a thing. But if we wait 30 days and search that title again, there will be a PDF uploaded to a scientist's website, or a PDF uploaded to some other website, or an embargo will have lifted and the journal article is suddenly free. And so waiting makes a difference. If you're basically waiting for somebody to upload it for you, or that embargo that I mentioned. An embargo on a journal article is basically an agreement that the publishers have with a funding agency, like the National Institutes of Health, NIH, for example, that after a certain amount of time, the journal article is going to be free. So embargoes are usually around 12 to 18 months. And basically what it means is from the publication day, the publisher can have a paywall on it for a year or a year and a half or even longer. But once that time passes, the publisher has to take the paywall off of it, make it open access so that it's free to the public. So sometimes when you're waiting, you're actually waiting for that embargo timeline to run out, and then it'll become free online. The rationale for that is because, like, for example, with NIH research, it's taxpayer dollars that are paying for that research in the first place. So to then charge taxpayers to access the research, a little not so preferred. And so that's basically just an agreement that has been made, is to have an embargo on it. One thing that I want to mention too, for any scientists on the call, is a lot of times people have this perception that the embargo isn't that long, like that it's not that big of a deal. Oh, well, the public can wait a year and a half to get their hands on it. There's two reasons that I personally do not believe that this is the case. One of them is that articles go available online before their publication date. So journal articles have an available online date where the publisher will go ahead and announce that it's going to be published, and everything's there. The title's there, the abstract's there, all the information is there. And if you have access to that journal, you can get that journal at the available online date. But then the publication date is a totally separate date. So oftentimes, like the official publication date. So oftentimes this embargo is actually longer than people realize it, first of all. Secondly, usually the clinicians that want this research the most are the clinicians that are most likely to be reading it within the first year and a half that it's published, because they're clinicians who are sort of staying on top of the research, searching these things, trying to problem solve with the research. And they usually don't want to wait 2 years to get their hands on journal articles. So it's helpful for like older research, but it's just not helpful at all for the most recent research and for the people who really want those journal articles the most. All right. So those are all the options, basically Googling, Unpaywall, sending an email. After that process, which total takes no more than 3 or 4 minutes, again, once you get used to knowing how to do these searches quickly, just a few minutes, and you'll know whether or not there's a free version available for you. Sometimes you need the journal article really, really bad for some reason. And if you get to that point, and if nobody can send it to you via email, another option that I didn't mention on the authors slide is you can email those other authors too. You don't have to only email the corresponding author. So another option would actually be to email one of the other authors by Googling their name, Googling their university, confirming that it's the person you want, and asking them for the publication, because anybody who's an author on the publication can give it to you. So that would be another option, but maybe they didn't, maybe the email went to their spam too, or they didn't respond fast enough. So if you really need the paper, your other options are basically to pay for it, unfortunately. Journal articles now are costing around $50 average, and I've seen them go up to $78 to $80 per journal article. So not very many people buy them at full price unless they really want the thing. But there's also options to rent them online for cheaper through some publishers. So some publishers will do something where it'll say, like, for $14, you can rent this journal article for 48 hours. And usually the rule is that you can view it on your computer screen for 48 hours before it expires for that lower cost, but you can't download it and you can't save it, which, you know, sometimes is perfectly adequate and other times just doesn't work. So another option is you can get in your car and go somewhere, which is not usually what folks want to do, but it is an option. So you could go visit a local university and as a guest, use their library and therefore use their library access while you're there. Especially the larger universities will have deep, full access where they basically have every journal article that exists nearly. Some of the smaller institutes will have much better access than a lay person can get, but you might have to wait up to several days or a week in order to get a journal article because they have to request it from a bigger library. But that's an option too. Very few universities will have like passes for people who used to go to the university. Most of them kind of expect walk-in traffic, but that can work. All right, so those are your options. Most clinicians don't know how to do those things, but the important thing to keep in mind is that it's really pretty fast. You can almost always get your hands on a free PDF, and there's lots of paths to it. We just need to continue to teach each other how to do it. So more things to know. If you're someone who doesn't have university access and accesses research at a high volume, you probably know about Sci-Hub. So Sci-Hub, however, is not legal. So we can't teach you how to do it nor endorse using Sci-Hub. Basically what Sci-Hub is a woman in Russia named Alexandra Elbakian decided to gather journal articles into this massive pirated journal article database. And there's millions and millions and millions of papers in this database. And you basically just find that URL on the internet, type in the title of the paper or the DOI, and it pops up the article for free. However, there's problems with it. And some of the problems are the URL moves around all the time because Sci-Hub has been sued repeatedly by publishers, and they basically have to hide in different corners of the internet in order to not be found. In fact, Elsevier sued Sci-Hub several years ago and won a lawsuit for millions of dollars against Sci-Hub, which makes it so that the creator of Sci-Hub can no longer step foot on US soil. So she sort of has to hide from a lot of the places where she would be held responsible for the damages. But sort of interestingly, right now there's actually an active lawsuit against Sci-Hub in India, where folks are thinking that it might be the case that they prove Sci-Hub to be legal in India because it's being used primarily for educational purposes and basically understanding science. We don't know how that's going to turn out, but if anyone is interested in this topic of getting research articles for free, getting research articles easily, I highly recommend at least understanding what's going on with Sci-Hub. Not for you to personally use it, but because if you understand what's going on with Sci-Hub, then you'll also understand what's going on with academic publishing. And it's also sort of just an interesting story. So it's a fun thing to Google because it's a pretty wild and crazy story. There's other similar stories of people trying to upload millions of journal articles to the internet and getting in trouble for it. Another example is a guy named Aaron Swartz. So you can look up that story as well, but he did it on US soil. And so it didn't turn out so well for him. All right. So what does all of this mean? I think when you actually start dipping into the implications of how hard it can be to get our hands on our field's science, the more you start to understand why it's important that we're all talking about this. So for example, what does it mean for our field's businesses? So our field's businesses need access to journal articles, right? Like they have to. They're the ones creating products, they're creating courses, they're creating entire websites where on the homepage of their website, it says that they're committing to evidence-based practice and evidence-informed products, right? But if they don't have access to evidence or the research articles, then they actually can't ensure evidence-aligned tools or content. So what does it look like for our field's businesses? What are they doing right now? So some of their options, I'll walk you through them because as a consumer, it's important you understand this. And also for any of the scientists on the call, it's important you understand it as well for anyone who is trying to develop products or businesses within our field. So one option is to purchase corporate subscription packages and tokens. Tokens are kind of exactly what they sound like. Like you get to purchase a package of X number of tokens, like 100 tokens, for example, at a 5 to 15% discount off of full price, depending on how many you're buying, which is a lovely discount. But when you think about the fact that journal articles are still 50 to 60 bucks a pop, it's not that much off, but it does help. And you can purchase these packages in order to get individual PDFs. So one token, one journal article. Another option is a corporate subscription package. So some publishers offer this. So for example, it's often looks about like $15,000 per year for unlimited access to one publisher, like unlimited access to Elsevier, for example, which, okay, for some of the bigger businesses in our field, that's not too big of a deal. However, the other thing to keep in mind is there's dozens of publishers of our field's research. So a $15,000 fee actually doesn't get you very much at all. It gets you some of the research, but not enough. So then how does this end up panning out? So if the average cost to subscribe to a single journal is about $1,000 on average, and there's over 300 journals that publish our field's research, then that means it's costing $300,000 annually for almost full access to our field's research, not even all of it. And when I say our field, I'm referring to SLP specifically, because I have to do this through my own business. Or alternatively, another way to do the math on it is if the average cost of a paper is $50 per paper and hundreds of papers are published every single month, again, it's still over $210,000 annually for almost full access to our field's research. So if you're considering the fact that businesses, in order to get their hands on our field's research in a fairly full, deep way, are paying $200,000 to $300,000 per year to do that, it's cost prohibitive for the vast majority of our field's businesses, which means that the vast majority of our field's businesses aren't using research and or can't get their hands on research in an inexpensive way. So their options are they can buy PDFs like these subscriptions, packages, or tokens, or just like clinicians, they can get them directly from our field scientists. Some of the things that they can't do that you'd think they might be able to, but they can't, is they can't buy PDFs and then share them with their customers. So like a business can't purchase PDFs and then share them with the people who buy from their business. That's illegal. It's also illegal for university faculty to partner with businesses in order to provide them login privileges or in order to supply them with PDFs. It's also illegal for businesses to try to partner with universities or university libraries for access. I've tried that. It's not legal. So for our field scientists, things to know. Again, you can't use your university access to get anyone else bulk PDFs. What you can do is share your own research. 100% of the time when somebody emails you and asks you for your journal article, it's legal to share it. But another thing that sort of bypasses scientists having to constantly send out free PDFs to people is to have legal versions hosted on a lab website in the first place. That way, when a clinician goes to Google the title of a journal article, it pops right up for them. Or when a clinician goes to their Google Scholar profile, it pops right up for them on their lab website. So this is why self-archiving for scientists matter. And everyone has to self-archive their own research. Like nobody else can do it for you, because if they do it for you, it's illegal. If you do it of your own stuff, it's not illegal. So for any scientists here tonight, everyone should be self-archiving if at all possible. And we'll provide you resources and links over in the chat for how to get training on that, because that's one of the big things that CSDisseminate as a group does, is trains scientists on how to legally self-archive their research. So spreading the message about how to make our field science accessible, as you can see, matters. We need more scientists and SLPs to know how to legally share and obtain PDFs in the first place, and perhaps even advocacy for better solutions than this that don't rely on clinicians and scientists' labor. And so some things to maybe consider is whether or not this is the model we want. The publishing industry is incredibly profitable, and it's always worked the way it does now, and the prices just keep going up and up and up and up. So there's a lot of folks who think that there's things about this that need fixed. So if it's something of interest to you, it's worth looking into so that you can be informed on the topic and become someone who has discussions around maybe what might need to be changed. And sorry, I'm accidentally opening tabs. There we go. And some open access humor. I'll go ahead and click this to play because it's pretty fun. If you guys, hey, Laura, will you confirm
boss,
if you can see this screen?
What do you think about making some of our articles open access? That's a good idea. Make the articles free to the public so that anybody can appreciate the latest scientific advancements. I like it. Of course, the author would have to pay some kind of publishing fee.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, that's reasonable. What, like a couple $100? Yeah, I was thinking maybe $11,000. What? Yeah, $11,000, and we put your article on our website for anybody to read. Why so much? Oh, you know, all the costs. What costs? Reviewing the article? Yeah, we don't pay reviewers. We guilt them into it because it's good for science. Okay, what about formatting? Your 12-year-old niece does that for us. Well, we got to publish it. That costs money. It's a PDF on a website. Kaylee does it in like 2 seconds. Kaylee? Your niece. Oh, yeah. Besides, who's going to be able to afford this? Oh, people will pay. Why? Because they have to. What do you mean? Researchers have to publish in order to keep their jobs or get promoted, and we're one of the most prestigious journals around. People will pay. So it's extortion. Here at Nature, we're doing crime. Oh, Christopher, don't be so dramatic. So let me get this straight. You want to charge researchers $11,000 to publish an open access article, thereby ensuring that only researchers with the most money get to publish an article, which defeats the purpose of having open access articles in the first place. Yeah, that's right. And this is guaranteed to be profitable because researchers' livelihoods are dependent on a predatory system that values publishing in high-impact journals. Hey, you got it. This, of course, is insane. It's academics, baby.
All right. That has been a favorite of folks going around lately. Okay, so that's everything we have for you, but a real quick plug. So CSDisseminate is a volunteer organization sponsored by the Informed SLP at this point in time. We always welcome other sponsors if anyone else would like to sponsor us, but basically sponsorship is just in order to pay for things like our website, paying for big Zoom rooms, things like that. But what we're also looking for is ambassadors. So we have two different categories of ambassadors. One is ambassadors that primarily exist at universities and can teach scientists how to self-archive. That is, teach scientists how to get free legal PDFs up on a professional website so that when a clinician goes to search for their science, they'll find free PDFs. Another type of ambassador that we're just launching is clinical ambassadors. So basically people who can share the message about how to get your hands on research for free for fellow clinicians. So anyone can do this, and it would be helpful for as many people as possible to help us with this, because as much as we're trying to teach people how to get their hands on research, we need other people sort of spreading the message about it. So if you're interested in this, definitely make sure to shoot us an email. Helen is also going to put a form. Actually, don't shoot us an email. Ignore that. Fill out the form that Helen put in the chat. And then we'll be able to sort of figure out which type of ambassador opportunity you're interested in and get you on board with us. But do feel free to email us with any questions about anything else as well, because we're happy to help. And that's why we exist, is to sort of help our colleagues figure all of this stuff out. So thank you all for attending, and we'll hang out for a little while longer too, in case anyone has questions about any of this stuff. We're happy to answer any questions or discuss it. It's a favorite topic of ours. So we could talk all night long about it if you want to. Otherwise, thanks for attending and have a good evening.